Hello, me again. The Autobiography of a Detroit Hustler. This chapter is entitled Cross Country Hustler. I was having the absolute time of my life. I was going from the East Coast to the West Coast at least once a month. I had become familiar with certain cities where I would apply my trade: Los Angeles, Salt Lake City, Chicago, New York City, and I would make those my regular rounds. I'd buy a one-way ticket to, let's say, Los Angeles. In the early to middle 70s, a flight to LAX from Detroit nonstop American Airlines was $150 coach, $225 first class. I'd usually fly first class if there was a seat available, and why not? It only costed me 50 cents. The flight included a meal, a free drink, and a movie. At LAX, I make my hotel motel hustle, catch a cab to Hollywood, or if I felt adventurous, take the RTD. I'd usually stay in LA about 3, 4 days, maybe a week. Hollywood Boulevard, Sunset Boulevard, Venice Beach, Santa Monica Beach, Marina Del Rey, Hollywood Park Racetrack, Griffith Park. I was every fucking where. I once met a middle-aged lady on one of the flights. We sat next to one another. She was coming from New York City on her way to her residence in LA, actually in Malibu. Our flight had a stop in Detroit, and her flight had a stop in Detroit and Chicago and Dallas. I got on in Detroit. My original intention was to disembark at each stop, Chicago and Dallas, and make my hustle. But in the 45 minutes it takes to fly from Detroit to Chicago, she and I struck up a pretty intense and getting to be very personal conversation. And let me tell you in no uncertain terms, she was fucking beautiful. She was from Spain, about 35 years old, long, black, curly hair with that skin tone that's not quite Caucasian, but not quite tan, but right in the middle. With green eyes I couldn't stop looking at. In fact, that's what got the conversation going. But the killer was, she seemed to be having the same infatuation with me. In fact, I know that's a fact. She couldn't believe that I wasn't mixed race because of my long copper colored hair, which was permed and curled to the teeth, and my light complexion. By the time we got to Chicago, we were ogling each other so tough. I decided, fuck the Chicago hustling. I'm flying straight through to LA. It's fall, October or November to the best of my recollection. And once we leave Chicago, the next stop would be out west, Dallas, where the weather would be warmer. And still not as quite as warm as it's going to be when we get to LA. But having come from the East Coast for her and Detroit for me, we're still dressed for that winter weather. When the pilot clears us for seatbelts, she gets up to put her jacket in the overhead and get out her little makeup box. I still laugh about the foolish look I must have had on my face when she stood over me and reached up to the overhead. My jaw must have dropped so wide open, I probably had black shoe polish in my goatee. I'm about 6'1", 150 pounds. She's almost as tall as me, about 5'10", and I say about 135 pounds. I remember thinking she looked like something off a fucking picture postcard. I couldn't believe my good fortune. She was a nurse at Marina Del Rey Hospital and divorced. She asked me if I had family in LA during our conversation. I told her I didn't. I was just coming to sightsee. At LAX, she gave me her number, told me to call, and let her know where I was staying, and got in the cab. I thought, shit, all that was for nothing. I should have stuck to my plans and stopped in Chicago. I probably missed money talking to her ass. I felt like a real lame. But I did put that number in my pocket. I threw it out of my mind and went to work. That was one of those that got away, I figured. When I got back to my hotel room later and I was in the process of getting myself situated, I took the number out of my pocket and called. No answer. Now remember, this is in the middle, back in the days when answer machines, before the days of answer machines. So of course, voicemail hadn't even been thought of yet. So I don't even know if I got the right number. I'm staying in a motel in Inglewood on La Tierra, right off of Century Boulevard. I made a few dollars and was waiting for the shift to change to collect my refunds. I decided to go out on Century Boulevard, catch a cab to Hollywood, and check out the pickings. This was about to be the best trip of my entire life. There was a pool room on Franklin Avenue, right off of Western Avenue, where a lot of hustlers hung out. I hung, I hung around there and shot a few games, lost a few dollars, drank a beer, and just kicked it with some of the players and pimps that hung out in the area. There was a couple of massage parlors on Western Avenue, whorehouses in reality, and there was a hooker I knew that worked in one of them. I was waiting for her to get off because I knew she had a car and I was going to need a ride. There was a taco stand on the corner of Western and Hollywood Boulevard where I took a seat on the bench and ordered a taco and sat watching the gathering of people in the parking lot when I noticed a car with Michigan plates. This car seemed to be right in the middle of the attraction and the main attraction of the crowd that was standing there. So of course I moseyed over to get a closer look and listen. A real nice looking girl got out of the driver's seat with a drink in her hand, and just about everybody else had a drink in her hand. I spoke, she spoke, nothing special. I told her I had noticed the Michigan plate and wondered if she was from Michigan, and if so, what part. Wouldn't you know it? She was from Detroit. She had driven out west with her brother, who was now standing close by listening, and introduced us to one another. From that point on, we shared a camaraderie that only when strangers comes to strangers when people meet from the same place and meet up someplace different and share something like we had with amongst another bunch of strangers. Well, I got that tongue tied. Plus, she was a cutie, and as it turned out, she was a hustler. She and her brother had family in L.A. and also from Detroit, and they had come to visit. Turns out they had played the short change game all the way across country and were still working it in L.A. Back then, L.A. was a place that hustlers came from all sorts, all over the country. It was a veritable gold mine. But as brutal as the LAPD were, they were really a conglomerate of hicks and hayseeds, dumb as hell. The only thing they recognized were gangbangers. If your shit was tight, you could get away with damn near anything in Los Angeles. The three of us and her brother, we got real cool real quick talking about Detroit. We were from the same side of town, west side, but from different neighborhoods. I told her I could use some help with my hustle, basically a ride, with some extra cash if they wanted to bust some money orders and get some refunds. For that, I would be willing to pay a third. And to show them that it worked, I paid them to drive me from Hollywood to Inglewood, and that's a real good little distance, to pick up my refunds at the motels around the airport since by now the shifts had changed. So off the three of us went, and this union felt really comfortable. By the end of the night, after having grabbed my refunds, I'm about 1,200 strong. In today's economy, that would be like $4,500. We went to a spot they knew in South Central near Slauson in Vermont, bought some cane powder and some blow heroin, and went to their apartment where they were sharing with a friend on Westmoreland and 6th Street in the Wilshire district. Here I got a real big surprise. Her friend was her brother's friend, boyfriend, I should say, a Mexican gay guy. I was surprised because her brother showed no indication of being gay. Not that I really gave a fuck, as long as he wasn't trying to hit on me, but I can usually tell right off rip. They usually have a certain little nuances about them that can easily be picked up on if you pay attention. And when I'm in California, I always pay attention, especially in LA, because LA, especially Hollywood, is rampant with homosexuality. They can do what the fuck they want to do. I just ain't into that shit. So like I said, I always pay attention. But he didn't show none of that. Fooled the hell out of me. Now, for the next 4 days or so, we had a great time drinking. No, for the next 4 hours or so, I'm sorry. We had a great time drinking, talking shit, listening to Stevie Wonder, Indivisions. Golden Lady was my favorite. And Don't You Worry About a Thing. And blowing some cane. Her brother and his friend soon went to their room, leaving me and her alone. By now, we're both good and high, and she didn't want to drive all the way back to my motel in Inglewood and drop me off. Plus, we had all made plans to work together in the morning with the money order game. they stood to make a lot more money a lot easier with me than with shortchanging. So it made sense for me to stay with her for the night. And I didn't see no problem with that at all. And so it went for the next 2 days. I would take them and they would bust them. After 2 days, I had to get back to the motel because I had only paid for 3 days and my time was up. Plus, it was time for me to make it back to the D. When we parted ways, I had spent a nice piece of change, but I made most of it back. Plus, I had a really good time. I always often wonder what happened to them. Now, I'm back at the room getting my shit together to fly home. I had already had them to buy me a ticket with one of the money orders while we were together. I it's then that I look and see Rosalita's number on a piece of paper. That was her name. And I figured, what the fuck? I'll try it again. And I'll be damned. She answered. I said, hey, I thought you had given me the wrong number or something. I told her I tried to call that first night. She told me she wondered what happened to me and that maybe I wasn't going to call. She must have been crazy out of her mind. There wasn't no way I wasn't going to call her a fine ass. We made arrangements for dinner that night and she would pick me up around 8. It's about noon. I had been out for 2 days and by now my perm is a little raggedy. I ran up on Century Boulevard, caught a bus to the hood down in South Central and stopped at the first barber shop I saw. Got my wig reset, which took about 2 hours. Caught the bus back to Inglewood to the motel. Paid for 2 more days. I had to pay cash this time. I hated that shit. And took a shower and a nap. About 7 p.m., I'm getting ready, and I was ready for real. I would always carry along a dress outfit just in case I needed it. This time, I brought a cold-blooded, dark brown silk and wool sport coat, a pair of eggshell white linen slacks from Cousins, a pair of brown Johnson and Murphy's, and a tan knit shirt from Skolnick's. I was sharp as a fat baby's dick. And the way she gave me the once over, I knew she thought so as well, because back then, they just didn't dress like that in LA. We had dinner at a restaurant out in Malibu. You talk about something beautiful. I ain't in no way a very melancholy kind of guy, but the scenery was picture card perfect. If you've never seen the moonlight shining over the Pacific Ocean with the trail it makes, then you miss one of the most memorable sights you'll ever see in your life. We walked out on the pier, out on the shore, on the pier, and out on the shoreline, and made out like we was two high school kids. Went back to my room in Inglewood. She wouldn't take me to her house. Could only be for 2 or 3 reasons. One, either she really didn't know me, or two, she had somebody there who might come there and didn't want to take the chance of me being seen, or three, she was afraid I would come back uninvited. Either way, I understood and didn't care. I didn't even ask why she didn't take me back. Okay, excuse me. And we did what we do with adults do in the hotel room. She left telling me to call her before I left for Detroit. The problem was, when we got back to my room, there was a note in the door from the motel management requesting I come back and come see the management in the morning. Bad news. I had overstayed my time. This probably meant they had encountered a problem with my money order and wanted to ask me about it. And that can only mean the next people be asking me about it would be the police. Time to go. I called United Airlines, rebooked my flight for the morning, and spent a very uneasy last night in LA. But I put her number in my pocket phone book just in case because I was sure this wasn't going to be my last trip to LA and it wasn't going to be my last time seeing her. I was right on one count, but wrong on the other.